They say revenge is a dish best served cold. For Ukraine, revenge is something different, something louder, sharper, and more explosive. To Ukraine, revenge is not a frozen whisper, but a thunderous roar of fire and steel. It comes with humiliation for the enemy, with carefully calculated destruction, and with the deaths of those responsible for killing its people. If revenge is a dish, then Ukraine has built an entire restaurant, and Russia is its only customer. And in September 2025, that restaurant served one of its most daring meals yet, a covert strike, thousands of miles inside Russian territory, against one of the Kremlin's most infamous military brigades. The world first heard of the operation on September 16th, when reports surfaced that massive explosions had rocked a Russian military compound in Shchitova, a small settlement within Primorsky Krai. This was no border town. Primorsky Krai is Russia's far eastern territory, a region whose capital, Vladivostok, lies on the Pacific Ocean, closer to Japan and China than it is to Moscow, let alone Ukraine. The sheer distance makes the operation staggering. From Kyiv to Vladivostok is over 3,700 miles. To put that in perspective, it is farther than the distance between New York and London. And yet Ukraine's operatives found a way to strike there, in the heart of a region Russia has always considered untouchable. The target of this strike was not chosen at random. The 155th Guards Marine Brigade of the 47th Separate Airborne Assault Battalion was operating from the Shchitova compound. This unit has a notorious reputation among Ukrainians. From the earliest days of Russia's full-scale invasion, the brigade fought with brutal efficiency, leaving behind a trail of suffering. They were involved in the failed assault on Kyiv in 2022. They later participated in the siege of Mariupol, a battle that reduced an entire city to rubble and killed tens of thousands. The brigade fought in Vuhledar, where it suffered catastrophic losses but continued to be rebuilt and redeployed. Most recently, it had been active in Kursk and Pokrovsk, attacking Ukrainian forces and civilians alike. Beyond its military operations, the 155th Brigade has been accused of heinous war crimes, including executions of prisoners of war and atrocities against civilians. For Ukraine, the brigade was a prime target not just for strategic reasons, but for moral ones. Pulling off the strike required precision. Drones, which Ukraine has used effectively throughout the war, could not travel such extreme distances. Even if they could, Russia's air defense systems would have easily intercepted them. That meant the mission had to be carried out by human operatives on the ground, inside Russia itself. Ukrainian intelligence, known as HUR, coordinated a plan that demanded extraordinary levels of stealth and planning. Operatives infiltrated Shchitova, studied the routines of the soldiers, and waited for the right moment. That moment came on the morning of September 16th, just after 9 a.m., when Russian soldiers were arriving at their compound, parking their cars, and preparing for another day of operations. What happened next was devastating. Two massive explosions ripped through the parking lot of the military base, engulfing vehicles and soldiers alike. The precision was chilling. Ukraine had chosen the exact moment when the largest number of soldiers would be exposed, ensuring maximum casualties among the very men accused of war crimes. Witnesses reported that the blasts were powerful enough to be felt throughout the settlement. Local Russian authorities quickly scrambled, but the damage had already been done. Officially, Russia downplayed the incident. State-controlled media claimed the explosions were caused by a gas equipment failure. But that explanation crumbled under even the most basic scrutiny. Why were Russian helicopters deployed immediately afterward? Why did security forces set up checkpoints and cordon off administrative buildings throughout Shchitova? Why were intelligence officers flooding the area if it was truly just a tragic accident? The truth, as most observers agreed, was far more likely. Ukraine had carried out a daring, deep strike, humiliating Russia in its own backyard. This was not an isolated incident. It fit into a growing pattern of Ukrainian operations targeting Russian military units linked to atrocities. In May 2025, Ukraine had carried out a similar attack in Vladivostok's Desentnaya Bay, destroying military equipment and personnel. Once again, the 155th Brigade was among the targets, and once again, Russia tried to mask the truth by claiming the blasts were caused by propane cylinders. Just a week before the Shchitova strike, Ukraine attacked a Russian National Guard unit using the exact same method. 2 bombs placed in a parking lot, detonated at the moment soldiers had gathered. That unit was home to the infamous Butchers of Bucha, Russian soldiers accused of massacring hundreds of Ukrainian civilians during the invasion's early days. 3 attacks, 3 parking lots, always 2 explosions, always against soldiers linked to war crimes. This was no coincidence. Ukraine had established a blueprint, a method of targeting and eliminating those it deemed responsible for the most heinous acts of the war, and Russia, despite its vast intelligence network, seemed powerless to stop it. The question then is why Ukraine risks so much to carry out these deep strikes. The answer lies in the scale of Russia's crimes. Since February 2022, Russian forces have been accused of systematic atrocities against both soldiers and civilians. Prisoners of war have been tortured, executed, and in many cases disappeared without a trace. In March 2024, the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission released a report documenting a sharp rise in such abuses. Almost every single Ukrainian POW interviewed described being tortured, beaten, electrocuted, threatened with execution, even subjected to sexual violence. Over a 3-month period, investigators confirmed that at least 32 prisoners had been executed. Amnesty International added to these findings in 2025, reporting that Russia's forces continued to abuse prisoners, often holding them incommunicado for long periods. This practice left families in agony, not knowing if their loved ones were alive or dead, while allowing Russian captors to carry out torture away from outside scrutiny. Survivors' testimonies painted a picture of cruelty. One former prisoner, Maxim Butkevich, described how Russian officers humiliated captives by mocking their families, beating them for every mistake, and using electric shocks during interrogations. Eventually, he was forced to sign a false confession and subjected to forced labor under constant threat of violence. His story was one among many, all pointing to a systemic pattern of abuse. And then there are the civilians. According to United Nations figures, nearly 14,000 Ukrainian civilians had been killed by July 2025, including more than 700 children. Over 35,000 more were injured. These were not accidental deaths. Russian strategy has consistently relied on terror tactics, indiscriminate missile strikes on cities, artillery bombardments of residential areas, and waves of drones sent not to destroy military targets, but to shatter civilian life. Mariupol became the grim symbol of this policy. A city nearly erased from the map, but dozens of other towns and cities have faced the same fate. The UN Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine concluded in 2025 that these were deliberate war crimes designed to erase Ukrainian identity and crush the will of the people. It is against this backdrop that Ukraine's strikes must be understood. To Ukrainian leaders, these operations are not just about inflicting losses. They are about justice, about sending a message to Russian soldiers. Your crimes will not go unpunished, no matter how far you run, no matter where you hide. The message was made explicit after the Shchitova strike. A source inside Ukraine's military intelligence told the Kyiv Post that the operation was a success and that Ukraine intends to hold every Russian occupier responsible for war crimes accountable. The statement left no doubt. Ukraine's campaign of vengeance had only just begun. The effectiveness of these strikes reveals something else: the strength of Ukraine's intelligence services. Over the course of the war, SHUR and the SBU, Ukraine's security service, have grown into formidable agencies. With help from Western allies like the CIA and MI6, Ukraine has built a network capable of sabotage, cyber warfare, targeted assassinations, and covert operations inside Russia itself. Analysts have compared this evolution to the rise of Israel's Mossad, efficient, ruthless, and globally feared. What makes Ukraine's intelligence machine even more dangerous is its embrace of new technologies. In 2025, HUR Chief Kyrylo Budanov revealed that artificial intelligence was being used to accelerate decision-making. AI algorithms now analyze intelligence data, identify targets, and even simulate outcomes, allowing operations that once took weeks of preparation to be planned in a matter of days. The integration of AI with traditional espionage creates a hybrid system that is faster, smarter, and less prone to human error. For Russia, this means its war criminals are running out of time. The psychological impact of these strikes cannot be underestimated. For ordinary Russians, especially in the Far East, the war has often felt distant, something happening thousands of miles away in Ukraine. But now, explosions are rocking their own towns. Helicopters are circling their skies and security checkpoints are stopping their cars. The illusion of safety is shattering. Russia's leaders can claim gas accidents all they want, but ordinary people see the truth. Ukraine can strike anywhere. For Putin, this is a nightmare scenario. His regime thrives on the projection of strength, on the belief that Russia is untouchable. Every successful Ukrainian strike undermines that image and exposes weakness. And in a state built on propaganda, weakness can be fatal. So what comes next? If Ukraine's words are to be believed, more strikes are on the way. The campaign against Russia's war criminals is not finished. In fact, it may only be expanding. In September alone, Ukraine carried out a trio of operations that left even St. Petersburg burning. Each new attack erodes Russia's sense of security further, and each one demonstrates that Ukraine has the capability, the intelligence, and the will to deliver justice. In the long run, these covert operations may prove just as important as battles on the front lines. They represent a new kind of warfare, one fought not only with tanks and artillery, but with intelligence, sabotage, and precision strikes. In this new battlefield, Ukraine has the advantage. Revenge, then, is not cold for Ukraine. It is fire, steel, and the thunder of explosions echoing across Russian soil. On September 16th, Ukraine proved that it could reach Russia's war criminals wherever they hide, and as long as those crimes continue, the strikes will continue. Ukraine has made its position clear. There will be no hiding place, no safe haven, no escape for those who commit atrocities against its people. For Russia, the restaurant of death remains open, and the only diner is Russia.